Call the meeting to order with a pledge of allegiance to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to welcome everyone to the French Creek COG meeting. We're going to move quickly through our administrative matters before getting to information on EMS. Ambulance service, we hope to keep this meeting about an hour long. There will be time for comments and questions after all EMS speakers talk for anything related to EMS service. Please state your name and organization before commenting. So now we are going into our administrative matters. We have to reorganize. So,
hi, Roxy from Union Township. I would like to nominate all of the 2022 officers if they will continue in the same positions for 2023.
thank you. I need a second for that. John?
Okay.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. So we don't have to go through each individual one, or do we?
It's up to you. You want to say it if...
Need action on subcommittees, tire, TV event, gas, and energy.
First, I heard you.
Again,
Once again, Roxy from Union Township. I would like to nominate the 2022 slate to remain as it is for the 2023 year.
thank you. Second? Someone? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. I need some action to approve the minutes of October 20th, 2022.
I'll make that motion.
Robbie, seconded by John. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Treasurer's report. To approve Tribune bill to pay in Treasurer's report. Rob?
Yeah, so the treasury report's in your packet. Not a lot going on there. As you can see, there's $4,740.30 in the Mercer County State Bank account. And then we'll need a motion to approve the bill to the Tribune for advertisement. And really, that should be about all the spending this year, with the exception of the web posting, right?
Yeah, or the PA call.
Or the PA COG, yep. So I'll make a motion to pay the Tribune bill in the amount of
$90.
$90.
And approve it
And approve the treasury.
altogether.
Yeah. Okay.
Second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Jill. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, that takes care of all our administrative matters. So now I'm going to introduce Josh Manuel and Krista Gear from EMS Commission, and I'm going to turn it over to those two.
Okay.
Well, I'm Josh Manuel. We're both here. We both sit on the EMS Commission, which was started back in 2021 as the EMS Task Force, and then has now grown into the EMS Commission. Several different committees that make up the commission itself. That comes from volunteers side, paid side of EMS, government, the stakeholders, which would be Krista's involved with active aging and some other agencies as well. And the purpose is to try to work on our problem. There's been a problem for years. Anybody who's been in EMS for any length of time knows that there's been an EMS problem, whether that's personnel funding and so on. So the goal of it is just try to find a solution on a county level. The state level hasn't really worked all that great, so we're gonna try to do it on a county and municipality level, so. With that, we've had several people who've given some testimony, have come in, we've had 3 of them. One, which is a full-time paramedic, gave his insight, one who has left EMS, and one that works part-time and still volunteers. So it's kind of a nice, well-rounded group to get some other insight for folks who don't work in the industry every day, so.
So Josh mentioned the committees. We do have 4 primary committees. The government committee, of course, has been reaching out to the municipalities regarding, you know, a $500,000 property tax, and I believe that's been withdrawn for the time being. But that was part of their discussion and what they were working on. As part of the stakeholder group, myself, Tanya Moyer from Crawford County Care Center, Bill McClincy from EMCO, and Dr. Kraling from Meadville Medical Center have been talking about the challenges that we know are very likely contributing to the current challenge. So everyone knows there's a global issue as far as, well, not global, more like national issue with hiring staff. No one can get enough staff. That includes the nursing homes, the hospital, social services. So the people in the community who probably do need to be in a nursing home, there aren't as many nursing home beds available for them to go to. That pushes their services back to, home care services, who also can't hire enough people to care for them in their home. So that is exacerbating, I think, the problem, because there are more people in the community setting who lack the resources to maintain themselves in their homes. We've been working with various EMS providers to solve specific issues with specific individuals as we're able to. So we get a lot of calls, and I'm the executive director of Active Aging. We get a lot of calls about, this person lives at home and she shouldn't be living at home because her house is in terrible shape, it's filthy, it's this, it's that. One of the things that we have to make very clear to people is Active Aging has no ability to just come in and tell someone how to live their lives, right? That's not our role. So we will work with people. We do what we can to help individuals, and if there's some level that they are incapable of understanding the situation that they're in, or being able to do anything about it, we can intercede in cases. But for the most part, if someone chooses to live a certain particular way, it's not our place to tell them that they have to live differently. So we do, though, try to put resources in place to help maintain them in their homes and alleviate a little bit of the stress that's happening on the EMS side. We were also looking into public education. So, what's an appropriate reason to call 911 versus what's not? Chest pains, call 911. Toe pain, probably not necessary, So the hospital is helping us put that together, and then we thought it would be beneficial for that to be distributed. We've also been, from Active Aging side and some of the social services side, we've been providing mental health helpline information. So there are lines available that people can call, 800 numbers if they're having challenges, mental health issues, that it's someone that they can talk to. There's an 800 number that's manned 24 hours in Allegheny County that they can talk to if they need to. There's a more local one, but it's not 24 hours. Also giving some consideration to maybe a public response to lift assists, individuals who literally just need help up off the floor, perhaps some sort of a text alert system, very much like what the schools use to make people aware that there's a 2-hour delay. Maybe a text system that would alert people that people who have volunteered that there's someone in this area that needs help getting up and needs help being with whatever. So looking into that. Clearly there would need to be some structure to be able to actually put that in place. And then we've also noted that there is a significant need for other forms of transportation. I think, a lot of the people in EMS will tell you that sometimes the ambulance has become a de facto transport to the hospital rather than being used for a true emergency situation. Josh will talk a little bit more about the communications and the volunteer committees because he's more familiar with those.
So as a communication portion, that's where I sit in on the EMS commission portion. I am a full-time dispatcher at Crawford County 911. Some of the things we're working on our end of things is through the county and their ARPA money. They purchased I Am Responding for everyone in the county. How that helps, multiple ways. It's going to save each department some money on their paging system. So that was a bonus for each department. As for helping us at the 911 center, we can now see in live who's actually going to this call. Before we would go 6 or 9 minutes of dispatching and then find out nobody's going to this call. Now we got to start the next one. The way the policy is now, if we don't see anybody on the board at the 3-minute mark, we're going to start the next nearest department. Our goal is to try to get help to people in the fastest manner we can, whether that's for the unfortunate toe pain for everybody or that comes down to a fire event. So far, it's been going good. It's a learning curve for everybody in the field who hadn't used it and hadn't used it in this manner. It's a learning curve for the dispatchers as well, to watching another screen. If anybody knows anything about it, there's a lot of things going on at one time there. So everybody's in a learning curve. So that's some of the things we're doing on the communications end. The volunteer service end, they meet in between each meeting. I'm not part of that. I know Eric meets with them some as well. They're looking at other ways, other units that we can use within the county, whether that's pulling them from Ohio and so on and so forth. So their world's constantly evolving as well in the volunteer side of things. So.
And the lack of volunteers is clearly, one of the things that have led to the current crisis. A lot of local fire departments used to help with, volunteer fire departments used to help with lift assist. There used to be more local ambulance services who have just not been able to maintain their volunteer roles. Our volunteers are aging out of it, and younger people, unfortunately, are not filling the void. So that is also having a significant impact on it. And as I mentioned, the public education part, the overuse, and I guess I could say in some instances it probably would be abuse of the system, where people think that they can call 911 and when someone gets there they can say, hey, I just need you to make me a sandwich, or I need you to do this, or I need you to do that. That is abuse of the system, and it does tax the system. They're genuinely there to save someone's life, not to run out and make a sandwich for someone, or help them in any other kind of way. And if they're out doing that for someone and a call comes in for someone who's having a very serious health issue, they can't respond to it because they're tied up elsewhere. So those two things are certainly contributing, and Josh will talk a little bit about other things that do as well.
Everybody's in the same crisis as whether it's volunteer or trying to find people who actually work for you. They just aren't there. There's help wanted signs everywhere. So we're in the same boat as well. Who wants to go volunteer their time for no pay? Up late, got to work the next morning, so on and so forth. Some of the things that I also run at Townville, and the fire chief there. Things we're working on is trying to actually get into the school system and trying to find kids that are of the age of 18, because 18 is the threshold to have to take EMT class now for the colleges. I had an excellent meeting with the principal at Maplewood High School here last week on trying to get our stuff into the schools and see what we can do on our side of things. That's just one person in the county. That's not a county-based thing. So those are some shortfalls. We can't get the teenagers like we used to. It used to be you had to be 16 to take the test, the state test. Now you have to be 18 to even start the class. So there's a shortcoming. You're not able to get the kids at a younger age now like we used to be able to. As for the government side of things, everybody has their opinion on the funding side from government. I'm not going to get into that. Ways that government can help. You can help your local guys, whether that's your streets crew, maybe there's something they need help with. Rather than the volunteers happen to go out and be there for an hour, maybe you guys can pick it up and do it in a 5-10 minute project for them. As of the 911 centers, many times we call the municipalities to come help. And usually they'll do it at a drop of a hat, come out, whether that's with a loader, help move some things and so on. We're all in this together. It's everybody's problem. It's not just our problem, it's a government problem. It's the citizens and the county's problem, because when there's not an ambulance there for you, then it's your problem. So we need to get to a solution before it's all everyone's problem, so.
And that's all we had to cover, unless.
Okay. Thank you, Krista. And Josh, appreciate it. I'm going to introduce Christy Martin. She's Michelle Brooks's
I guess district
right-hand
director.
person. And there'll be, and Brad Rowe, as they've been working on legislation to help the EMS service situation. At this time, if they wish to speak.
I'll defer to you.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brad Roy, State Representative. I represent a lot of western Crawford County, some of central Crawford County, and a little bit of western Erie County. There are a few pieces of legislation that I am working on. As most of you know, to help fund EMS, you can do a 2 mil property tax. Some of you do, most of you don't. I have legislation. This came out of a meeting that was at East Mead a couple months ago, and people wanted different options. So my legislation, there could be, municipalities would be able to enact a fee on phones similar to the fee that's already on your phone that funds the 911 center. You'd be able to do that. Or you would be able to have a per capita tax with the money solely going to fund EMS, or the local services tax. You could increase that to an amount specifically for use for EMS only, or you could continue to do the property taxes. A lot of municipalities, they don't want to keep sticking it to the homeowner with property taxes. They want to kind of spread things out a little bit, so that's the intent of that. A couple other things I'm working on at the county level to allow counties to help out. Currently, there's a hotel tax on hotel room rentals, and that money is used right now to fund tourism. Well, it's kind of an outdated thing. If anybody in this room was going to go to the Grand Canyon, you wouldn't try to find out what county that's in and then go to that county tourism website. You would just go on here and Google hotel rooms, Grand Canyon, or golf courses, Arizona, to get it. You don't really need the tourism bureaus anymore in the traditional sense. So if counties wanted to, they could take that hotel tax money and use it for their EMS system. In Crawford County, that would be about $400,000 a year. Another option I want to give counties, several years ago, I actually voted against this, but the legislation that increased the gasoline tax so that we have the highest gasoline tax in the country, which is a whole nother topic, part of that same legislation gave counties the authority to implement a $5 vehicle registration fee. Well, I have another piece of legislation. Well, that fee can only be used to fix county-owned bridges and county-owned roads. Well, my legislation would give counties the option of using that money to fund the EMS system if they wanted to. They wouldn't have to, but it just gives them that option. And that would also be about $400,000 a year based on how many vehicles there are in Crawford County. Now, as far as the state funding goes, just this month, there was an increase in the medical assistance reimbursements. If somebody's on medical assistance, the payment, Eric can probably get into the details, the payment is real low compared to what Highmark or Blue Cross or an insurance company would pay. We also increased that rate about 5 years ago, but prior to that, it was probably 20 years ago it was increased, and it's way lower than it should be. So a lot of us, we're going to continue to push to get that rate increased, because we don't believe that if an ambulance responds to a call, if the total cost of that call they shouldn't lose money on doing that call. They should at least be able to break even. But right now, if somebody's on medical assistance, the ambulance responds, the ambulance service lost money on that call. So we kind of want to fix that. Now, unfortunately in Harrisburg, even though we have some of the highest funded schools in the country, most legislators, the governor, the big push at budget time every year is more money for the schools. Pennsylvania schools already spend $4,000 a year per student, more than the national average. But watch what happens. As the new governor makes his budget address, as you talk to legislators, they're all going to say the same thing. The number one priority is even more money for schools. Well, I think we need to prioritize some other stuff. The EMS system is literally a matter of life and death. So, you know, some of us are still pushing because we don't think that you should be forced to take your ambulance, get somebody taken to the hospital, and what that costs you is more than what the state reimburses you. That's just not right. We need to fix that. And around here, what's the percentage, Eric, medical assistance calls?
73% are Medicare or Medicaid. So
What's Medicaid?
Medicaid is probably 16, 18, like that.
Okay, so about 18% of the calls, guaranteed right out of the box, just the state-funded calls are going to lose money. You add into Medicare, that's not quite as bad, the funding for that, but so those things really are driving a lot of the issue. I'm going to defer and let other people talk, unless anybody has questions or anything.
Okay. Christie?
Well, I am here, basically, I'm here on behalf of Senator Brooks. She was not able to make it today, but I'm here to take notes and listen, you know, offer her all of your comments and everything, and a learning curve. So she is on the chair of, or she is on the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee in Harrisburg. She did have a piece of legislation, and I'm not sure if you read in the Meadville Tribune today, that is working on Josh's point of recruiting firefighters and trying to get to students when they're young, still in high school. And basically, this bill, it passed unanimously out of the Senate committee yesterday in Harrisburg and is moving on to the House now. It's Senate Bill 114, which would award 3 grants of $150,000 each to 3 different community colleges as part of the PASHE system. One would be in the eastern part of the state, one would be in the central part of the state, and one would be in the western part of the state. And they would be used to establish grant or fire training programs for students in high school during the school year. So this would with the hope that they would remain firefighters in the future. But as I said, I'm here to listen, take notes. Please feel free to contact our office. We have an office right next door in the building here. We're there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But feel free to call any of the offices with any ideas, suggestions, so you know she can continue her work as well.
All right. Thank you, Christie. Thank you, Brad. We appreciate both of you working on legislation to try to get some answers to all this, because it is a big problem. I'm going to ask Eric Henry for some comments here at the present.
Thank you, Lyle. And I would start by saying Representative Roy and Senator Brooks both went to a meeting, went to Harrisburg, and put bills on the table. I think that's what we've all asked them to do, so there's a lot to be said. Brad and I will talk about this stuff, and Alan Clark from the OES office will send us the messages, and we've solved the bills. Brad will tell you probably there's a little bit of a lack of support in regards to some of those bills, because as I've told everybody, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is large, and so in southeastern Pennsylvania, they've been funding ambulances differently for years. In southwestern Pennsylvania, they've been funding ambulances differently for years. In those areas, paramedics make $28, $29, $30 an hour, and they have for 10 years. So when Brad gets together with his other representatives, they might look at it and go, we don't have the same problem in northwestern Pennsylvania that we do in Philadelphia or southwestern Pittsburgh area. Those places are both, Cranberry Township is a good example, have been funding and created their own ambulance service for a year on a township level because they have tax base. That's just the bottom line, we all know that. So with that being said, I'd just like to thank you all for coming. You may know about the EMS tax and the hold on EMS tax, and I'm going to tell you why. A couple of things happened that you may or may not know. I went to almost all 22. I still have one that I haven't met with yet by their choice. We're still working on getting there. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus in general, but I will tell you, there was some good response from townships and there was some bad response from townships. Some townships told me to cut my wages to my staff. Some townships told me to cut my benefits. Some townships told me to make everybody part-time. Some townships told me to stop providing ambulance service after 11 p.m. Some townships told me that maybe I should do a better job of my own budget. Some townships said it's not their responsibility. One particular borough municipality told me that there was 19 calls or 17 calls in the municipality that people can drive themselves in. And so at the end of the day, what happened through the process is there's been great response from some of you. Woodcock Township, I'll give them credit for the fact that what they did was they calculated out to a household fee to see what it really was. And they knew in their math and what their head and what it was going to be. Those were good things. And that's because that's what the cost is. I was asked to bring my personal tax return, bring my company tax return. I've had all sorts of information, good and bad. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is this. I'm a small businessman. Brad said, you know, we shouldn't be forced to run ambulance calls at less than the cost to run an ambulance. We do that 73% of the time. That's what we do. We run 73% of our emergencies are at less than the cost to run an ambulance service. It just is. I mean, that number is, I can show you that number from my ambulance service, I can show you from Superior, I can show it from Emergent Care, or anywhere else. What we've done that entire time is handle 90% of our calls in a response time mode that's above the NFPA standards of under 5 minutes 90% of the time. Even in the 16335 zip code, our response time is actually an average of 5 minutes. That's what we've done for 20 years. We just can't do it anymore. And that's what the idea of the tax was. We went to a policy committee in Grove City. Brad's on that committee. And the legislator said, go talk to you guys because it's your responsibility. That's what they said. That's why we went to you. And honestly, the response I got from some of you was how you prioritize EMS. I just prioritize it differently. And at the end of the day, I'll tell you the crux of my discussion and my breaking point was when a township person said to me, you will come to our township even if we won't sign because you won't let some kid get hit by a car and not show up. I want you to think about that for a minute. You know what? I won't. I will absolutely not ever let that happen. And that's where the change came. So what we did was we saw a Medicare number of 8.7, which we never thought would get past the President of the United States. He actually signed the bill, left the multiplier in, and so that helps on the fiscal side. Brad and the legislators have a Medicaid increase we looked through. Unfortunately, we lost a paramedic who died, and that was another way for us to try to save money and redo our schedule. I myself am going to go back on the ambulance and work some rotations, and we're going to save a couple $100,000 doing all of those things, including cutting out our capital expenses. I'm just here to tell you folks that no matter what you guys end up deciding, no matter what happens here, I will not provide the service at that level because I can't. I just cannot go back to where it was at. I worked hard to make sure a service has capital, to replace ambulances, to pay people a living wage, but I certainly cannot cut the wage of my people, cut their overtime, and do those things that I was asked to do. So my goal is in 2023 is two things. One, we're going to run the system and try it with an 8.7% increase, with a Medicaid adjustment, and we're going to lose money. We already know we're going to lose money in 2023. I can tell you right now, I have a budget, that's what we do. But what I am going to do is I have a letter, and I wanted to wait till after the COG meeting. I talked to Mike about this the other day. We're going to send a letter out to the townships to say, those townships that want to support the ambulance service, we're going to provide you an emergency household membership that will cover your people in the event of emergency. So there is a return for investment if you want to give it. That's up to you. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. We're still going to provide coverage to your township. Your folks will be one way or the other. So that letter is on my desk, ready to go out. I'm just waiting for this meeting to go because Jill invited me to come. And at the end of the day, I'm just frustrated because there is no one else that you guys would ever work with. No gravel company, no attorney, no solicitor, no repair shop that would ever work at less what it costs to run a service. It's not your fault that we're here. It's not Brad's fault that we're here. This has been going on for years. It's just now to the point where the state law says it's your responsibility. I think that the state law can be changed. I think it would be better to be in a different format. I just don't create those laws. And I wish I could. I wish I could snap my fingers. And I'm very leery, and this is not because of Brad or Michelle, I'm very leery at the state level that these things will change. Because, as Brad said, he sent me a message, hey, I got a bill out there. I looked at it, 2 sponsors. 2 sponsors and 200 and plus representatives. That's not a good sign for a bill. So it sounds, as good as that sounds, that's not a good sign for a bill. I don't know what else to do, folks. I don't know how else to get people driven. I took a lot of hits for negativity from community members. I was compared to a car wash once, and I mean, it's interesting to hear where people value an ambulance. I'll tell you, last night when we were all out of ambulances, and I'll end with this. When we were all out of ambulances, I was the only paramedic left, and they gave us an alpha call, which is a minor call, for a lady on Pettis Road from my house. Well, my passion and my caring is that that time of night, I drove to Pettis Road and took care of her. Wonder how she got to the hospital? By my vehicle, because there was no ambulances left. That was it. She didn't want to go, she wanted to refuse, she was doing evaluation. That's the system we're in, and that is not a good system. It is not a good system we have. It's just where we're at. And everything that Josh will tell you, he's a dispatcher. This area, despite the fact that we are shorthanded, we get out the door and answer our calls. He can identify another town to you that they have waited 90 minutes for an ambulance before on scene. 90 minutes. That's the alternative. And I won't run an ambulance service like that, I just can't. And so that's where I'm at. I want to find solutions. We created the Fire and EMS Commission for a reason. We're actually I think we might be the only county in the state of Pennsylvania who has an active Fire and EMS Commission for this purpose. And we're just trying to find solutions. And it's been a long journey. Those that understood EMS and value EMS, I appreciate that. Those that don't, I don't know what to tell you. You probably either never used one or never needed one. But that's really where we're at. So I thank you for your time, Lyle, and I appreciate your
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to open up for comments. Anyone has anything that they would like to say to any one of them, please? The floor is yours. Yes, sir.
I'm Steve White from Custer Township. I want to thank Active Aging. My mother-in-law used them for several years. One question I have there is, my mother-in-law had a button that when she fell, when she pushed, and that button set up, they were supposed to call us as homeowners or her relatives first. A lot of times they didn't, and ambulances were dispatched because of, now is there some way of these companies, because they didn't do protocol as to what, is there a way of feeding them to pay for some of this?
I'm really not sure, off the cuff.
But I mean,
Right.
these buttons are out there. I mean, I know several people that have them.
Right.
And this happened to my mother-in-law a couple of different times, that they were supposed to call us. And it basically is what you said. She had fallen and couldn't get up.
Right.
All she needed was a hand to get up.
And I would assume that they're making a judgment call based on their conversation with the individual, whether it should be a family person or
But
an
some of
ambulance.
these times that they come, it wasn't, they never called us.
Right.
They called the ambulance service first, and that was the mistake that company made.
Right.
So what happens is those companies will call, I'm gonna interject real quick to kind of, those companies will call the 911 center and say, so-and-so at this person, whether they've made contact or they haven't, has pressed their medical alert button. Okay, so we take the information, ask, have you talked to them? And they say yes or no, depending on what the call is. Sometimes they say yes, they've fallen. Okay, it's pretty cut and dry, little information. It's then our policy then to call the residents as well.
Okay.
So
See, I didn't know how that actually worked, but that's there again, and I understand if they push that button and they can't contact somebody, then that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, plain and simple. And I get that, but I just wondered how much of that goes on that, affects. They're sending them out there for just what you said, to help somebody get up.
Most medical alarms are cancellations or lift assist, that's what they are.
Yeah.
I mean, they just.
We try to jump in ahead of that and try to call the residents to, if we don't have to, because sometimes there is a time you might be able to get it fast enough before we dispatch anybody, or we can cancel before they ever leave the station.
Right.
So we try to mitigate that problem.
And then to Brad, your bill, you want to tax $5 a registration fee on every car or whatever.
Give counties the option of doing that. They don't have to.
I understand that,
Right.
and that's all well and fine, but as our municipality and others are around, we are becoming an Amish community. So basically what you're telling us now is that you're gonna tax us $5 on our vehicles. What about the Amish buggy, the Amish tractor that they use for transportation and stuff? His ambulance still goes to them for service if they are
But
called.
that's why my bill gives options. Your township might want to do a per capita tax. So, every adult 18 and older would pay the per capita tax. Or if you thought everybody had one of these, you could do the phone tax. Or you could continue to use the property tax. But that's up to the supervisors
But
to
at
decide.
that point now, you're putting more on us as supervisors. That makes more cost of us to figure out who has cell phones and who does this and who does that. It's adding to our responsibility.
They already know who has the cell phones, because the cell phones already have a fee that funds the 911 centers in Pennsylvania. So the list is already there. It's pretty, that part's not complicated at all.
But that's where I'm at is, we're slowly, our municipality is becoming an Amish community. I mean, we're probably 25–30% Amish over what, and it's not fair for us to pay for the Amish.
Well, when the county would have the option of doing that fee, they don't have to do it, but they could. At the township level, you could do a per capita tax, you could do the local services tax, or the device fee. However, I just think municipalities should have options. Your only option right now is property tax. And some people think that the net should be spread a little bit further and get more people paid.
The property tax, and you're right there, it only hits the people that own the property. It doesn't hit the renter.
Right.
These other people, it doesn't affect them. So every landowner is the one that's paying for whatever. And I understand that.
If I could comment about your first thing again, I want to say thank you for being willing to go and help your mother, or mother-in-law, I'm sorry. There are many older adults in our county who don't have family nearby, or I'm sure Eric will tell you this, don't want to inconvenience their family. They'll call 911 because they think, well, those people are working, they can come, and I don't want to bother my daughter.
Happens all the time.
And I'm at a point, I have a lot of family there, and a lot of them are getting aged, and it wouldn't matter which one of them it was that needed the help. I would drop what I was
Well,
doing
thank
to
you for
go to that point. And it's like my mother-in-law. They made 3 phone calls one day and got me. I was 15 miles from home. I left what I was doing and made my trip 15 miles back home to pick my mother-in-law up off the floor.
Well, thank you for doing that.
But as active aging, she was at a point too, and I thank you guys for what you have done. She had an aide to come in 2 or 3 days a week and helped her, assisted her, and because my wife just couldn't take care of it all.
Right.
And that was a big benefit and a plus to us until she physically had to go to the nursing home.
Thank you.
Hey, Lyle.
Yes.
My name's John Charles, with West Meade Township, and I hear loud and clear what this gentleman said over there. But I don't use that Amish thing. That doesn't cut any ice with me. I mean, they're people, they live, they've been here forever. Here's what I will tell you. If you did your homework, 90% of the Amish carry cell phones. Put the tax where you're gonna get your money to pay for this service. I believe that's the answer. I've talked to Eric numerous times. We've talked about different things, taxing, this, that, the other thing. I know at this point West Meade Township stepped up, and I was surprised to see that things were put on hold, but I understand it. But I think at the big picture, what little bit West Meade and Woodcock were gonna do isn't gonna touch this thing, isn't gonna fix the problem. But these things here, people live by them. And, we have a lot of Amish in and out of our community as well, working, logging, doing whatever. And every one of them's carrying a cell phone. So I still say that that's the answer to the majority of this. And I hope that, that we're able to, as a government, as the lowest form of government, that we're able to step up and get something done, and everybody else steps up as well to pay for this thing. So I just think the cell phone tax is more uniform, and I think it's you know, there's people out there paying their cell phone bill before they're paying their sewer bills, okay? All right? And we all know that to be true. So the bottom line is I think this is the answer. So, just my opinion.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I think, I'm Terry Simonet from East Mead Township. I think one of the things that we don't know is what it's going to take for you to survive this per year. If $400,000 covers what you need to operate successfully, then a $5 registration fee by the county works great. If you need more, then you've got to go to other sources. You know, the figure that it takes that is required by the county residents to make you survive this issue, I think is key on what we charge. If we know, you know, if we know that figure and as townships we come together and cover that to get the service we need, then that's something maybe we can do as supervisors.
Right, and I appreciate the question, Terry. So 400,000, the actual number, if you take out, like for instance, Cussawalla, the man from Cussawalla, they have multiple ambulances in their township, and you have to split it out, what it really works out to. The number is actually more like 260, 280. To give you an example of what one ambulance costs, I don't buy new ambulances, I remount my ambulances. So I have an ambulance that's getting remounted on it's a 2010 box, so it's got a lot of age on it. On a new Ford chassis, we put 300,000 to 400,000 miles on it. That vehicle is $186,000. The cardiac monitor inside that is $45,000. The stretcher is $30,000. And so if you add those things together, that's what the cost of what 260 is. And that's buying a remounted vehicle. And what the system needs, what the money is for, is to sustain the system. What the system needs is correction. And what I mean by that is the EMS Commission needs to drive this discussion. The actual bills that I would like Senator Brooks and Representative Roy to look at is to actually open the EMS Act up and allow ambulance services to provide a different model. And that model for me is this. As a paramedic, if I work a cardiac arrest on you or your family, I can terminate that care after a good solid effort within the protocol guidelines. But you know what I can't do? If you call an ambulance for toe pain, I can't tell you that you can't go to the hospital. That's a problem with the EMS Act. Because you're allowing paramedics to run our whole cycle of a cardiac arrest, running your meds, running your defibrillations, doing your best effort to save someone's life. You can terminate care in the field if you've met those protocols. But if you go to someone's house and they have a hangnail and they want to go to the ambulance, you have to take them. And when you take them to the hospital, if they have Medicaid, you have to accept what they give you, or Medicaid can say, you know what, that wasn't a necessary call, we're not paying you a dime. That's the world of EMS, and so I agree with what you're saying. There's a money to sustain it, but at the end of the day, the system, if it's not replaced or changed, those people calling, and I gotta be honest with the dispatchers, their jobs are very difficult because they have limited resources, and they know that this person doesn't need an ambulance, but they have to call the ambulance. That's what's wrong, is the system needs to change. The EMS Act needs reopened and looked at and reviewed by ambulance services who work this every day. And at the end of the day, you should never ask any business to leave their garage and lose money. And I think that's where it has to come. It can't just be money. I agree with you, Terry. It's not just money. It's replacing the system. Like Krista said about the hospital. They're going to put some billboards up you're going to see in the next couple of months that talk about when you should call an ambulance, when you should go to the hospital, when you should go to an urgent care. They're going to put billboards up for that because they understand. If you walk through any ER right now, it looks like a mass unit. There are people in the hallways. There are people onboarded, meaning that they're waiting for admission to another hospital. 30, 45, 60 days they've been waiting in Meadville Medical Center's hospital for a bed to go somewhere else. That's what's wrong with the system. Is it's all got bound up and backed up, and where our hands are tied because we're forced to do those calls. That Josh knows this is probably the last ambulance that Meadville Ambulance has, and you're going to go take care of the guy for the 13th time, and this time's complaint is toe pain. We have to go because that's what the code says. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thanks. The next question I have then is, what's the chances of that happening from our representative? I mean, because he's got a point. You know, it's got to change in Harrisburg on their requirements. And what's the chance of that happening? I mean, are we just talking, or is there a possibility of changing his requirements?
Well, everything's possible. Sometimes it seems like it's a miracle any law ever passes, any law ever gets finalized, because as you know, things have to pass at the committee level, then on the House floor, then the committee level in the Senate, then on the Senate floor, then the governor has to sign it. And then even after that happens, a lot of laws face court challenges, and it has to be deemed to be legal and constitutional and everything. So it's a miracle any law gets passed, really. But I could only guess if we tried to change the law that ambulances can tell people, well, you don't really need to go to the hospital, have somebody drive you. There would probably be advocates that say, you know, the people supporting that bill want people to die when they call 911, and, you know, EMTs and paramedics shouldn't be making those decisions. You know, doctors are the ones that should decide. You know, there would be all kinds of rhetoric like that. But it is needed. It is needed, because if Eric is hauling somebody that has toe pain, you know, 5 miles away, somebody might have just fallen off a ladder and broke their neck, and they're going to lay there for a half an hour until the guy with the toe pain gets there. And we should give dispatchers more discretion too. If there's a checklist dispatchers could go through. You know, are you bleeding? No. Did your chest hurt? No. Are you dizzy? No. Did you pass out? No. Well, why don't you just have your next door neighbor take you? You know, we should look at that too, because there is only, I don't know if I want to publicly say it, people would be alarmed if you knew how many ambulances were available right now in Crawford County with a crew ready to go. It would be alarming of how few ambulances there are right now.
And I think to the point of what is the likelihood of something would get passed, I think a lot of it is educating your representatives, your senators, and I know, you know, everyone's done a great job with our area, but it's the other parts of the state that, you know, maybe if you have people, colleagues, friends, whatever, in other parts of the states, they need to contact their representatives, their senators, and make sure they're educated, because I think that a lot of that is the problem. A lot of the senators don't, you know, in a different area of the state this may not be as much of a problem for them. So I think that's key too. So as much education you can provide is key to getting these things moving as well.
I think Eric would know more about this than me, but how sparsely populated our area is, that makes it harder too, because I can only imagine, you know, in Mill Creek Township, you have 60,000 people within a few square miles. Their average ambulance run, I don't know the real numbers, might be, you know, 20 minutes, whereas Eric's is probably an hour by the time you drive to get the person.
And Madeira's in the
Yeah.
She's the chief of Klein Lake Ambulance. She provides ambulance coverage to the Ohio line, North Shenango Township, and part of Vernon Township. She has one ALS ambulance. So if she has a call that she goes to North Shenango Township, that person wants to come to Meadville, that's her ambulance for that entire time that she processes through. And that ambulance service area needs to be covered by someone else, whether it be an Ohio service, a BLS service, or myself. And so it does, those longer distances do affect us in a lot of ways.
So in the more populated parts of the state, it's probably not as much of a concern. It's like, well, this guy has toe pain and he wants to go to the hospital. That'll take us 2 minutes to get to his house, a minute to get him in the ambulance, 4 minutes later we're at the hospital. You know, so in 7 or 8 minutes we're done. Whereas that exact same call around here might be 45 minutes or an hour that ambulance is tied up. So it's like with a lot of issues. The more urban legislators, they, you know, live in a different world and they don't, you know what it's like in rural PA. So it is tough.
Bonnie Smith, Salisbury Township. Could your legislation be based upon population?
Well,
Because that would eliminate the big cities.
Which I have several. Which piece? I have several different bills. My bills are all options. Counties can opt in. Municipalities can opt in, as far as the funding and so forth. As far as the EMS Act, I think that would be complicated if different counties had different, like what they're allowed to do as far as not sending ambulances, and it seems like that should be uniform.
Well, Brad, part of the problem too, and to answer your question in regards to how it also equates to townships, if you have Medicaid, and you know that I can't balance bill you, it doesn't matter to you why you call the ambulance. That's part of the problem. There is no other recourse. We can have them sign basically a waiver that says this is unnecessary. But when we filed that, and I don't know if Madeira does this, but when we tried that pilot program to have Medicaid people sign a waiver that said this is not necessary, we may bill you, nobody had a problem signing that paper. Because they had no intention of paying a balance. And our return on collection is atrocious because the people they're not gonna pay that. And so that's a big problem when the state puts more people on Medicaid, which they have, since the pandemic, more people have gone on Medicaid. When you know an ambulance comes and you'll never see a bill, there's no interest in them trying to be more frugal in how they use it, because if the money is not coming, there's no balance coming out of their pocket. And so that's the problem, is that these repeat offenders, Josh can tell you addresses that he sent ambulances 30 and 40 times. I mean, I can tell you the same thing, and those people are not, those are the people that we're dealing with. If they had to pay a balance, or if they had something come out, they would not do that. But they don't. There's no recourse for that use of the ambulance, and that's a problem.
Is there any way, like, I know, like the city of Meadville, I think there's a certain amount of fire alarms that you can have in a year before they issue it's an ordinance violation, correct? I believe there's I think it's 3 or something. In these instances where it's, an abuse of the system, and it's clearly an abuse, could a local ordinance perhaps, cite the person for that abuse? Like I've heard the laundry, if somebody needs their laundry changed, they call 911. When the EMT gets there and says, hey, can you put my wash in the dryer? Like something like that could be an ordinance violation that the municipality cite. I mean, I'm just throwing something out there. I don't know the
Well, if they're not
legalities of
paying
that.
one thing, they're not gonna pay the other either.
I know, but it's just another.
I think it's already a crime to call 911. Like if you call 911, say your house is on fire, and they get there and you say, okay, my house isn't really on fire, but can you, go to my mailbox and get my mail for me? That's already illegal, I think. Do you know? I mean,
So we have had instances, as it was in the paper, of people abusing 911, they were charged. But it's not just one time. This is an abuse of constant and constant and constant. And every time we answer the phone, that ties up a line that somebody else can't get in on too, so.
And I'm guessing there's a good number of those individuals who probably have some mental health issues as well, and so that punishment doesn't really.
I think, Robbie, I would defer you to your own police chief, but I think you'll find out that a lot of them, we've had this discussion, a lot of them don't want to really get involved in that situation because they'll say, well, how am I to decide if that's good or bad, even though they know, and state police have kind of been in the same boat, so.
Yeah, no, it's because, I know we could talk about funding, but also kind of getting to the problem of stopping the abuse would actually help save some money, so.
What law allows you to charge? Who wrote the law and what municipality
For abuse?
enforces that law, that if they abuse 911, they get charged?
That would be,
Where does that come from?
that would have been a state legislation that would have been done. And then each municipality, whether you're covered by the state police or municipal officers, is then who would then go enforce said law.
But the law had to have been written by the state,
yeah,
so it's already out there.
correct.
So why can't we use this? They're abusing 911. When you get called to a house 40 times in a year, that's an abuse of 911. Why aren't they being charged? If the law is on the books for this, if you get called to the same house 10 times, you should be charged. And that'll put an end to it. But we don't, right now, it looks like, it's like, oh well, we can't do anything, so let's not. When we have a law in the books that says we can.
I'm not gonna open up to actually know what the law actually says. That would be something a solicitor would have to get into.
Terry, I can answer it to some degree. We did have years ago a case in the city of Meadville, and they did try to press charges, and the police officers were hesitant in going further because they felt it wouldn't work, it wouldn't end well in the favor of at the magistrate's level. And I don't know I'm not a police officer, but it's a good question to ask. I think to ask the state police or ask other law enforcement officials what they know, or maybe Alan can look into it. I don't know. I don't know. I agree with you though.
Yeah, if it's there, let's use it and try to cut some of these calls down, which is gonna help the whole process. Truthfully, I don't understand how you can go to a call and give somebody that overdosed Narcan and not arrest them because of the drug abuse involved in it, and we don't do that either. Now, that just doesn't make sense to me. If somebody does drugs and they overdose, we hit them with Narcan, and I know one case in our township, 3 times in one day, they were given Narcan. And nothing was done to them. That doesn't make sense. They broke the law. They're doing drugs. And we know it because it's in their system.
From the EMS side, as a paramedic for over 30 years, my job is to save their life. And if I have to save it 3 times, I have to, and that's what my job is, and that's why I'm a paramedic. But I would say on the police side, I know there's a municipal question here for you. There's a law that if you call 911 for an overdose assistance, you can't criminally charge someone for the actual drug possession. That's something like that, something correct like that. I think you guys are shaking your heads, but we run into that a lot. I don't know where that law comes from. Does that sound about right from?
Yeah, the intent of laws like that, if kids that are underage, high school kids, if they're drinking and a kid drinks too much and he has alcohol poisoning and they're gonna die, either A, let the kid die, or if you call 911, they'll save them, but then you get arrested for underage drinking or using meth or whatever it is you're doing. So yeah, it's kind of a, I don't know if it's good or bad, but the intent is to, not have people die because they're afraid they're going to get arrested. And now I was at a meeting once and I said, if Narcan is administered, maybe we should make a law that person has to go to jail for 24 hours just so they can monitor him. And because you're right, sometimes there's, they'll go to the hospital, overdose, get Narcan, well then they go use the restroom in the hospital, and then they find they overdosed again an hour later in the restroom. And it's ridiculous. Well, I thought they were going to throw me out of the meeting. Now, I'm insensitive. I don't recognize drug addiction's a health issue. I hate people. All these terrible things they said. But it's like you can't have all these ambulances tied up on completely preventable stuff. It's just not. At some point they're going to be dealing with somebody. The 3 overdoses in one day. At some point, 5 miles away, somebody's going to die in a car crash where their life could have been saved if that ambulance wasn't tied up over there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Jim Walsh, Venango Borough. Our fire department is a small department. We ran 337 calls last year, over 250 of them were QRS. Listening to the monitor, it seems as though, who makes the decision to automatically dispatch an ambulance when it's a QRS call? It seems like they answer before Venango even gets to the base, you're dispatching an ambulance for whatever call.
Mm-hmm. So we use a software system that kind of gives us the coding for what needs QRS, what doesn't need QRS. As for us dispatch QRS, both Eric and Madeira both know, that's the quick response. That's to try to get somebody there before they can get there, because Madeira, she's tied up, she might be dropping somebody off in the city of Meadville, but yet still needs to go back to North Shenango Township. They would sit there and wait that entire time for them to get there. As for us to pick when we send them, we don't send them on the alpha responses. We try not to. I know most of those come out as lift assist, we understand. Those are just a BLS service kind of call. BLS and ALS calls, Venango's gonna go. Because, let's face it, if Eric's tied up with 3 ambulances in the city of Meadville, he's still got a free one up to get to Venango, Cambridge Borough, whichever,
Yes.
wherever they're at.
Yes.
And let's face it, a lot of yours probably come from Cambridge Township and Cambridge Borough for your
The
majority of your EMS runs, yes. So we make that decision at the 911 center to answer that question on who goes where. Some of that, depending on the call, is dispatcher discretion. Some of it's built out by policy and procedure of how we do things.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I believe we got everyone. Well, I thank you all for coming out. I'm just like everyone else. I really don't know what the answers are. Something's gonna have to be done sooner or later. Hopefully, we all get on the same page and can work together to get this accomplished. I want to thank the panel for coming out and bringing some information out that hopefully will help us. And let's work on that. Okay, before we finish, we need a motion to authorize the secretary to draft and send out letters of support with suggestions on the EMS ambulance service, issues to all legislators, PSATs, and any other interested entity.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion on that motion?
I think just because I'm gonna be drafting it, I'd kind of like to maybe work with a few different people to come up with some really good, strong language, unless somebody else would like to do it.
Don't everyone raise their hand.
There's Eric in the middle of that too.
That's exactly,
Yes.
I kind of look down at him. I just think a combined effort would be a better solution. And PSATs, Rose couldn't be here, but
Right.
Rose from Salisbury Township serves on the county, the Crawford County Association of Township Officials, on the county committee. She recommended that we would do this now before the end of February, because any solution, and we should actually work with Alan as the county solicitor to make sure if we have some kind of wording to put forward at the county level, it has to be done by the end of February, so that the county association kind of approves it, recommends it. It would be the resolution committee, which Renee's on. So I think it's kind of a joint effort gonna have to happen here in the next few weeks. And then we'll go through even other entities, other COGs or anybody else wants to use the letter we come up with or use the wording, we would certainly welcome that. Maybe a group effort statewide or, more so than just our county would help. That's my thoughts.
I will tell you all, I've been on the resolution committee for PSATs for a number of years. Finally, I got away from that. Got out of the limelight. But here's the thing. When you get that resolution, and I would go to a meeting, they would have a meeting prior to the convention. That was discussed, and it was discussed really hard. I mean, is this right, is that right, or what? And then, if it was okay, then it would go to the general people at the convention to vote on it. Now, you're gonna get 10 or 15 people at that convention that just decides they don't want it, and they'll sit up there and tell you all kinds of things for 10 or 15 minutes that this isn't the right thing. But I think there's enough people in the state of Pennsylvania that sees, because there's a lot of rural area in Pennsylvania, and they're gonna see that this is necessary that it gets done. So I think by having all our ducks in a row on this, and like I was telling Jill the other day, I said, once you get this written up and you think this is how you want it, call PSATs and they'll help you write this and make sure it's right. So let's do it. Let's continue for it.
I think to actually work with the legislators too,
Yes.
because obviously
Yes.
you already have bills that are out there.
Mhm.
There's things that if we want to support it, now's the time to do it. So we'll work with everyone, at least down at that end of the table. How's that, Krista? We'll skip over you for the moment.
Well, everyone has to work together to get it accomplished. I can tell you, it's not going to be easy, but let's try it.
I assume, based on what you're saying, that there's COGs across, I'm not really for
Yes,
that, okay.
yes.
Well, everyone who's in a rural area could certainly call their representatives and ask them to support Brad's bills as well. They've got to hear that it's important for them to step up and do it, sometimes.
Okay, so I need that in form of a motion that we're going to authorize secretary and numerous people to do a draft.
I'll make that motion.
John, I'll second that motion. Any further discussion on that? Yes,
Oh, not on that
okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Do you have something to say, Madeira?
Thank you. Sitting here listening to everything, I do have a question for Representative Rowe and for Eric. When you're talking about the EMS Act, opening it up, revising it, et cetera, the last time that that had been done and had changed was when they put forth the language that the certification processing had to be national registry. So with that said, you, Eric, know my beliefs of the standard of care. Raise the standard for the training and the education, eliminating students who are unable to do an EMT class, perhaps at a lower level, work their way up. But if you're going to ask the Bureau and the legislature to reopen and revise the EMS Act, this is the time, because I have asked for how many years with the crisis and the collapsed system. It's not failing, it's collapsed, folks. That even an amendment for 2 years for us to fill in and backfill, but with strict criteria, very strict criteria. We all know that a lot of the programs are not what they should be, and there's a lot of backstory, but this would be the time that this needs to be addressed. Because people, you'll hear a lot of talk from all over, people complaining about doing transports, patients complaining that they waited 12, 15, 20 hours to get from Meadville to Cleveland. Some of these are critical transports. Those patients still need to get where they belong and where they need for the higher level of care. Those patients are suffering waiting. Our local hospital does a great job, but there are some things they cannot do. And if you're at some of the other hospitals, well, you probably should go to Meadville because you stand a better chance of getting something done. Only because of how resources have changed within the larger hospital systems as well. So I would really, really strongly ask and urge that if you're going to be talking about revision of the EMS Act, to basically tell people, hey, don't call, or you don't need an ambulance, which you never really know until you're right there what that person has going on. That lift assist, we have been on more lift assists that were a cardiac arrest, that were a massive stroke, that was basically a non-salvageable patient. And now there are the people that you just smile, help them to the stretcher, and make it a real quick trip to get them there safely, service with a smile, right? You know that probably they didn't have anything else to do for the day. I don't know what their story is, but bottom line, if we're gonna be talking about that, we have to go back to how we get the people there. We need more people in the system to run calls. It's not a paid versus volunteer. It's across the board. We don't have sufficient personnel. Yes, the money part, well, that's very important, folks. You all know what the costs have gone up, the diesel, the cost of anything from a minor expense to a major expense, but we need the people to fill those shifts and to keep continuity going.
One issue, when I was an EMT for 18 years over at East Mead, we're just QRS, but when I took the EMT course, it lasted several months, and then there's a state written exam, the state practical exam, and it was optional to take the national registry exam so you could be an EMT in other states. Well, now, as of a few years ago, to become an EMT in Pennsylvania, you must take the national registry exam. And that's a well-intended thing, but the problem is the scope of practice is greater in some states, and there's questions on the EMT exam, the national registry exam, of things that you can't do in Pennsylvania. So what does happen, I think, sometimes, I think some instructors might not spend a lot of time in a EMT course that lasts several months teaching stuff that you can't do. And then the students show up for the exam and there's questions about that on the exam. I've had multiple people that failed the National Registry EMT exam, complain about that to me. And what's your take on that?
Well, to further expand on that, the classes are based on the national standard of curriculum. The textbooks, whether it's a Brady book, a Mosby book, the Pearson books, any of those, are all based on the national standard of curriculum. The states themselves are also based on that. So the problem with the National Registry, could it be a combination of it being computer adaptive testing, which all that means is you start off with a certain level of questions, and if you get 5 right, they become increasingly difficult. Testing the judgment of the person reading this scenario. When registry was written, and I was an optional registry EMT way back in the day, because truthfully I liked patches, they were gold, they were glittery, they were pretty. I'm a registry paramedic, and thankfully I had the paper test where I could think about it, go back if I needed to. Those classes only have so much time to teach in the classroom. A lot of it falls on the responsibility of the student to read the book, okay? There is a level of reading comprehension you must have. This is a medical field. The old days of picking them up and throwing them on the cot and let's just go, diesel therapy, it doesn't work. We save lives because of the education, the training, the ongoing training. They have to learn that, and they need to know what's going on with that patient. The state of Pennsylvania finally gave EMTs the okay to check a blood sugar, which sounds silly, really it does. We went by signs and symptoms. Pale, cool, clammy skin with the signs and symptoms with a history of diabetic. We assumed as an EMT in basic that it was diabetic. If they were really pink and kind of confused and they had like fruity smell on their breath, we assumed that they had high blood sugar. When they really gave it to the EMT, that it's okay to go ahead and clean that spot off and poke the finger, it was to help rule out a stroke. That was why they got it. That has been in the curriculum and in the textbooks since I took my EMR class in 1997. It's been there. The instructors only have a finite amount of time per subject, and they've broken down the subjects more so that the students understand. The material's been there all along, but it's also the responsibility of the student to take ownership of the class they're in and do the work. And that is a part of the problem, folks. If you're playing with other people's lives. Do you want somebody that really took it seriously? Or do you want somebody, I'm gonna be an EMT and a firefighter. I'm gonna be cool. I'm gonna make $50 an hour. Come on. All right, I mean, that's another part. It's not one problem with this disaster. But that has always been there. It's in the textbooks.
Thank you, Matera. Anyone else have anything to say? All right, is there any other business?
Real quick,
Yes.
I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, but this, we talked about the EMS here and the crisis here and the EMS commission, what's going on there. There's also a fire commission, the county fire commission that's going on. I think we need to bring members from it to the next COG meeting, or potentially sooner than April 20th. I don't know if we want to lose momentum, if we want to do this next month or in March, to kind of hear from the fire commission what's going on there. I am a member of that commission along with several other, we've got quite a lot of fire chiefs, assistant fire chiefs throughout the county that are a part of that. I think it'd be good to hear what's going on there, because there's issues there that they're working to address that will affect the townships, the municipalities and whatnot. So I think we need to hear from them so we can support them and give them some guidance, because there's the same thing, there's the government subcommittee, there's a lot of subcommittees there. Perhaps, we can help support them or, and whatnot. So, I don't know if we want to do that at the April meeting or if we want to have one sooner than that. Meeting quarterly, sometimes you don't get a lot done because you only see each other 4 times a year, so.
We've advertised the meetings already. All of the COG meetings are advertised every month, but we usually choose to just meet quarterly. So we could do it as soon as the February meeting, which would be the 3rd Thursday of February if we wanted. It's already advertised. We could continue and invite a couple of representatives, just like we did here today. kind of do the same thing.
Sometimes when you have the wind in your sails, you need to keep moving.
That's right.
If you let this thing
Exactly.
die down, that's exactly what it'll do.
Yeah.
That's what I think the February meeting, Robbie and I talked earlier, that sounds good to everybody, and we'll do it here again.
That's fine.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Our next meeting is April 20th, 2023.
well, it'll be February,
Well, that'll be.
but yeah, our normal
next-
meeting,
Our
yep.
normal COG meeting will be April 20th.
Sounds good.
Okay, now we got that straight.
Do you have a time for that?
It'll be at the same, it's already advertised for 11:30 a.m., so what's
No,
the,
she means for.
The April
fire.
20th.
that'll be 11:30, it'll be the same, it's been advertised for 11:30 on, what's the third Thursday of February, I guess I can look back at
The 16th.
okay, there we go. Yep, and we'll do the same thing, send out the emails again, and,
Okay,
right?
thank you all for coming. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all on the panel.
Thank you.
Appreciated all the information.